Okay, so let's get started. I'm a little late. So welcome everyone. My name is ABISHOLA. If you've never met me before, welcome to my very first podcast for Sorry, I'm still trying to figure life out. Also known as Sis Flow for shorthand, because that's a lot of words. I'm so excited to be here with you guys and talk about growing up, learning life, being a better person. And I am even more excited to have my very, very first guest be someone that over the past of a few months, I've gotten to know. He's an amazing human being, extremely creative. I love the talent and I'm so excited for where his career is going. Please, everyone, welcome Jonathan Wang.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here and taking time out of your very busy schedule, and I love it. So of course, we're just gonna start off. Please introduce yourself. Tell us about what you're doing right now, how are you, how's life going, what's good with you?
Well, hello everyone. My name is Jonathan Wang. Wang, if you are from the South like I am, and I use they and he pronouns. I am currently in San Diego, but I was born and raised outside of Dallas, Texas, and I am a first-generation Taiwanese Texan. Currently, I am a research assistant at Scripps Research, and I'm looking at HIV. I got into research because in high school, we didn't learn anything about sex and we didn't learn anything about queer people. And I thought, wouldn't it be absolutely ironic and absolutely hilarious if a queer person solved a quote unquote queer disease?
Yep.
So I based my entire life off of being petty, and I'm kind of here for it.
And you know me, I strongly support a petty agenda, so I'm 120% behind you. Know that for sure, okay?
Yes.
Of course. So let's dive a little bit into it. We've talked a little bit about your current job status. Let's also talk a little bit about how we met, because it has nothing to do actually with science or medicine or HIV or anything. So how did we meet, Jonathan?
Well, we met because we have a good mutual friend named Jessica Chen. Shout out to Jessica Chen. And she is currently doing her MFA, and she created this wonderful, wonderful drama web series that you all hopefully will be able to watch by the time you listen to this. And it's called Drama High. And so it's playing on the tropes of Asian dramas. And so, she absolutely had to get Rafi because she is an Asian drama encyclopedia.
Stop it.
And it was just anything that you need to know. Rafi will be like, oh, it's kind of like that one season of that one episode, and then she'll find a clip and she'll show everyone, and all of the writers in the room will be like, now we know what to aim for, what to look for. So absolutely pivotal to like the cornerstone of Drama High. And so I joined because Jessica and I met in Taiwan where we were doing film together, and it seems terrible to say, but I think it's so strange to work with people that you really feel like you can collaborate well with, and have an open dialogue and conversation with. And so we just liked working with each other so much that we decided to continue working with each other. And I think that's a really great and wonderful thing. It's just kind of sad how that seems to be out of the norm.
That is so true. That is a great point, and I'm going to stick a pin in it because we're definitely going to come back to that.
Yeah.
But let's track back a little bit. Let's start by looking at where we've been, right? Looking at our past and how it's informed who we are today, and then dive a little bit more into the work we've been doing with Drama High, as well as our aspirations for the future. Pandemic mind, but for the future. So my first question would be, all of us had when we were younger, either it was in school or it was our parents, mostly our parents because we're both immigrant kids. But we all have that question of what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? And I wanted to start did you have that first, do you remember the first and earliest childhood dream? How did that come about? What were you aspiring to be? Looking back, did it even make sense? Like, I remember, I think the first time I had that conversation was maybe I was 6 or 7 with my dad and sister. We were having ice cream. I remember this so vividly now. We were having ice cream because it was this amazing ice cream parlor that's been closed down since, because that's how times change. And I remember my dad was like, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I remember it was something so, not asinine, but very, given my height and body type, it was like, I want to be a ballerina. I want to be a gymnast. Lo and behold, I am 5'11". Like, those two were definitely out of the bank. By the time I was first grade, not happening at all. But it was just funny to think about in retrospect, like the things that I was thinking would be a potential life goal, life career, dream. Literally my height, my literally body could not say like, no, sis, you're not doing that. You're not doing that at all. So I wanted to hear from you what happened with you.
Well, first of all, really important question. What flavor was that ice cream?
Okay, so first of all, there was a specific flavor. We would always go, my sister would always, no offense to my sister, but she would always get birthday cake. There was a specific one that was like, I would say it's the earliest version of what Ben & Jerry's does with their milk and cookies. Okay. So you would have like your chocolate chunks in there, but then you also had like sprinkles of I love chocolate. I love chocolate and vanilla paired together. So it's vanilla ice cream, chocolate cookie chunks in it, and then also Oreo or Oreo-esque type of cookies crumbled into it. And we would always get fudge on it. I had a very bad eating habit when I was younger, to say the least, but it was delicious. It was delicious.
I am obsessed. That sounds amazing. But I will say though that I think nowadays, I think when we were younger, we had, it's so sad that I feel like when we're younger, we have so many aspirations. And then when we look back on them, we're just like, oh, like, I can't believe I thought about that. Because at the time we were like, no, we can do anything. And I think we need a little bit more of that in our like day-to-day lives. And so, yeah, I mean, even now, right there, I can't believe it took so long, but I think just a couple of years ago, they came out with like point shoes. I think that's what they're called. But for like melanin, which is like, seems absolutely like way too late in the game. Like it should have been so much earlier. And then they finally paired like traditional ballet with like hip hop. And then everyone was like, oh my God, it's so amazing. And it's just like, because y'all gave that.
Where was this? Exactly. You know what's ironic? So me, I'm a nostalgia type of person. Very often I don't watch new stuff unless it's like, you know, your Asian or K-drama. That's the reason why I watch so many of them, because it's only 16 episodes. But I'm very much like, I like to watch things as I watched as a child. And I recently found out that there's this Australian show that I was watching when I was a teen called Dance Academy. I was obsessed with it, like obsessed. It was 3 seasons of these teens growing up, going to the most prestigious dance school in Australia. And I was just like, oh my goodness, this is the most amazing storytelling. But I also realized as I was watching it, like the way I love dance and I love to watch dance. I love to choreograph dance, but I'm not a dancer, or I don't call myself a dancer. You know what I mean? And I think it really does go into what you were talking about, where when we were younger, there was so much room and aspiration. And then the older you get, the more you narrow down. It's like, well, I'm only good at this, or I can only try this, or if I can't make money out of it, then I shouldn't be doing it. And I think it really does tie into that, because as I was watching Dance Academy again, I was like, my bones for some reason was like, it like my muscles like, you know how to do this. Yeah. You can do this. And I'm just like, nah, I'm too tall. I can't be on point. I can't do all these like pirouettes. No, I can't do that. But then all of a sudden I see myself doing some type of random modern interpretation. I'm just like, it's in you, it's still there, but you know, life kind of just drags that creativeness out of you, however it may be.
Yeah, I don't think 5'11" is too tall. It's just like, well, king, grow taller, right? Like that's not a you problem.
It's just like, I just need to squat down a little bit lower when we do hip hop moves, but that's okay. I see tall people do it. It takes a little bit more. It's a little bit more of an advanced move. However, it is possible. Nothing's impossible. It's just us changing the narrative to make it impossible for ourselves.
And I will say, since we're on the topic of K-dramas, That Korean one, Navalera. It's on Netflix.
Yes.
Right, that
Okay.
grandfather.
Song Kang. Okay.
Yeah.
First of all, Song
Okay.
Kang.
Yeah.
King.
Yeah. But right, like you're never too old, and like you don't even have to. I talked about this recently with someone. It's like when you're like young, they're like, okay, so if you want to do this hobby, that means you have to be the best at it. That means that it's like your life aspiration, or it's just like for intro, right? Where is that middle bar? Like, what about people who enjoy it and want to continue doing it, but don't necessarily want to make a career out of it and are more than like beginner level? We don't have that kind of like accessibility. And like, what's the reason?
I agree. I think some of the many unlearnings that I've realized as, you know, I grow older in age and wiser in age is that when, especially in that undergrad age, you know, 18 to 22, where you, for so long, your life has been defined by school and what you do and how it changes after that. Once you leave and realize there's so many things to do, you kind of, you know, lost. You're kind of abandoned. It's like for so long in my life, I've dropped things because I realized I won't be the kid who gets a scholarship to a D1 school. So I can't play that sport anymore because I need to focus on things that will help me get through college. And then college will lead to a good job. And then I'll have my house with the doors and the career and all that jazz.
Right.
And I think maybe it's because of the generation, maybe because of the nature of what life can look like. It's so multidimensional now. You don't need to have the picket fence with kids and a little dog anymore. There's so many different ways you can say you've gotten success or you've lived a life. A lot of things I've had to learn is like, maybe I can go back to those things that I was very interested in, that I'm not going to say like, I love to sing and I've been told that I'm a good singer, but I'm not going on American Idol and having my ass out there looking like a damn fool. And Simon Cowell saying, girl, I don't understand who was talking to you, but they need to stop talking at all. So like, I know the balance, but like, if I have the opportunity to sing in karaoke, let me take that opportunity to sing karaoke or sing in the car as loud as possible. Like those type of learnings is like, enjoy things, even if it doesn't make you money, even if you're not the most perfect at it, even if you're just like, it's like, you know, you have some pitch problems, but you can find it along the way, sis. You have so much more of life to do. Definitely agree with that. Definitely agree.
Yeah. And I think you bring up such a great point about doing things for joy. I think that's one of the biggest things that I'm learning more and more about while I'm in therapy. And so like one of
therapy.
Just like a moment for therapy. Therapy has just been so great in kind of like unlearning a lot of these like negative thought patterns and like toxic thought patterns that we have ingrained in us, whether it's by our well-meaning immigrant parents or through society itself. I mean, going back to your original question, I remember my first thing that I wanted to do was be a weatherman. At recess, I would always like have a news show with my friends, and I would always like be doing the weather. And then during commercial breaks, I would be ice skating, right? Like couldn't ice skate, like never took a class in my life, but like kind of goes into representation. Michelle Kwan was my representation. And I was like, look at her. Like the GOAT still in my eyes.
Exactly.
And I just like, I wanted to do something like that. And based off of that representation, I think that's where I got my next goal of wanting to be an actor. I saw B.D. Wong and Law and Order SVU, which by the way, I should not have been watching at such a young age. I did.
There's a lot of stuff. We can come back to that, but there's a lot of stuff that I think in retrospect is like, what was our parents sitting in the back watching this with us thinking when they allowed us as children to watch? I don't understand, but I think it really does actually speak to our generation, and it's helped grow the, you know, generational personality that we have. I think a lot of the stuff we weren't supposed to be watching has really cultivated that interesting personality us millennial Zs have. And I'm here for it. I'm concerned by it. And I think a lot of us, as you said, need to go to therapy because it's quite problematic at times, but it does give a lot of great content.
I mean, you got to write comedy based off of what you know.
Exactly.
Yeah, but yeah, so he was BD Wong was also the voice of I believe Shang in Mulan in the 1990 something version, 1996. I can't
Yes.
remember. Yes.
Yes. Okay. First of all, I'm pretty sure he was my first male crush. I'm not
Yeah.
sure, probably, but man, was Shane fine. Yes. No, I remember him very well.
Yes, yeah. And he was in the Broadway production of either M. Butterfly or Madame Butterfly. So not only was he Asian, he was also queer. And I to this day, I still think was just such an influential role model in my life because I was like, oh, here is what a queer Asian male could look like. Funny anecdote, not so funny at the time, but in high school, I was just a mega bitch because all of the media that I consumed was like, oh, gay people are just sassy and kind of bitchy. And they do it for the laughs. And so I was just so rude and sassy at anyone, just like quote unquote, just like reading people just to read. And I think about it now and I'm like, wow, that was so like the amount of people I must have hurt just doing that because the only people that I could look up to,
yeah,
right, were that trope in media.
Yes. Yeah.
And I feel like that was a turning point in my life about representation, which eventually got me into wanting to write films and things like that. And in college, yeah, I remember my parents didn't want me to do anything related to plays, theater, anything like that. Yes.
Yeah.
So I had to sneak out and then audition. And then I remember I auditioned for a role so bad. It was called like, it was Santa themed play. And I was like in junior high and I had no acting experience and I auditioned and I think I was a diversity hire. But I got it, and my parents, like my mom was like so upset because it was like right after violin practice, and I was like, well, can you take me here? I want to audition. And she was like so upset, but she's like, yeah, fine, go. And she dropped me off, and then she's like, I'll come pick you up later. And so whenever there was like rehearsals or anything, I was always dropped off. Like never did they stay to watch or anything like that. And so that was rough. And my oldest sister is currently trying to be an actress in LA, has done a few roles, but I remember I used to have to read for her when I was still in like junior high or high school. And the roles that she had to audition for, oh my God, like for Asian women in general, it's like, ooh, sexy bohemian witch. And it's just like,
yes. Yep. Speak on it.
Right. And I just like, I was just so upset. And a lot of the times I had to help her like prepare for these roles, and like the blurb about them would be so small and we'd have to like extrapolate, be like, why is this Asian woman here? Why is this Asian woman here? Yeah. And it like, you couldn't come up with anything of sustenance. And it was just like so embarrassing. So I remember having to do that with her. Also having to read a lot of like roles where like we were in a relationship, and that was also like very
that's a little weird. It's like just for this one section right here.
Yeah.
There's a little something going on, but remember, I still don't like you. You're only my sister.
It was, yeah. So, I mean, it really ties back to this, representation and just trying to quote unquote figure things out. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. You brought so much forth about specifically media and TV and film and representation, how important it is and integral it is in how it does shape the way in which we view ourselves as well as other people view ourselves. As you were talking, like, as you said that, I was like, very much a lot of, the media that we grew up with, late 90s to early 2000s was typecasting. It was a different level of typecasting because it wasn't even like, oh, you're put in the role of the Asian, you're put in the role of a specific idea of which we think Asians are. They can only be this, this, and this. And because you're Asian, now you can only play this, this, and this. And I think it was even just like a level on top of the levels. Like you can't even just be the Asian character who's not there for any reason. You're just like there to be a filler. It's like, no, now you have to be very either character or problematic racist view of who you are. And it's like, but that's not, I know acting's acting, but also sometimes acting is revealing a little bit of yourself. And I think a lot of the stuff then was not reflective in any of the communities, minority communities, specifically queer, specifically Asian, specifically Black. It just like, I was, as I'm saying, like I'm rewatching Will and Grace, and it's hilarious as it is. It was just like you said, very bitchy, very catty. Like it was back and forth, just dig after dig after dig. And it's hilarious because I love a good read, but if your whole dialogue is just back and forth of you being catty to each other, what does that mean for somebody who's still trying to figure themselves out? And they're like, well, if this is how people view gay people, then I must act like this for people to realize who I am. This is the best way to show people. Even like, it might just be their own coming out. It's like, now I'm just gonna act like this. It's like, well, this is a very quote unquote gay way to act. And they're like, of course, thank you for realizing it. I'm gay. Like that's literally, I feel like that's a lot of for our generation, the way in which they have to show people who they are. And I think with you doing your exceptional work and the stuff that we're writing, I think we'll be able to change that narrative, hopefully. It does take a lot of time to unlearn as we're learning through our different experiences. But I think with more content that shows the diversity within the diversity, more people will realize that there is no monolith to like people like, you know what I mean? Like when you think of a white person, there's like 5,000 different shows with a white person as the main lead, and most of the cast are white, and they have all diverse backgrounds. They all do different things. They're not one and the same. And people automatically is like, yes, because white people are not a monolith. Anyone can do whatever they want to do. But once you get into those minority communities, it's like they can only do this or act this way, because if you don't act this way, if you don't speak this way, if you don't do that, then you must not be Black. Oh, you're not queer enough. You're still figuring yourself out. Soon enough, you'll reach that point. You're not Asian enough. You have to eat with chopsticks. You have to do this. You have to do that. And you're like, when do you realize that everything you're saying is quite problematic? Because I grew up in the suburbs and this is how I speak. I'm not going to go start dropping letters everywhere, shape and form, just to make you comfortable in what you, in your mind, have created as the identity of a Black woman. And I think I completely agree. It's like, I've had to, even just looking at my college self, undergrad to graduate school, like I was like, why was I so freaking hyperactive in undergraduate? I'm thinking like, if I were to do even a week's worth of activities I did in undergrad that I did in graduate, I would pass out somewhere. And it's because I realized it was like, because you're the only Black woman in this space and people think of Black women this way. So you have to do this and have a hey sis and yes girl, and I'll be there and I do this and I do that and da 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 da. And I'm like, girl was tired. And once I've learned that, and I'm like, it doesn't help you in the long run to keep acting like something you're not. You're just going to, dig yourself into a very deep hole and come out very exhausted. You start to realize it's like, maybe I should just be myself. And then maybe I should create stuff be more visible, where there is this diversity in the identity.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it goes on to say so much about how we view quote unquote African Americans versus Black. I remember a really, really great friend of mine, her name is Beverly Chukwu. Shout out to Bev. She's also Nigerian American, and I remember she put up this pilot for our screenwriting class that we were in together, and it was like, why do we have so many quote unquote like shows about like white families in the suburbs, such as like Seventh Heaven, et cetera, et cetera. But we don't have what it was for her growing up in like a suburb of Dallas, Garland, Texas, being Nigerian American and having to navigate being the only Black family in this quote unquote like white neighborhood, going to this school and then going to like a Nigerian community center. And it was just like, we have these preconceptions of what Black is, of what African American is. And that's all that we're like really, I feel like maybe it's just because I'm not consuming a lot of media, but it just seems like that's what media is still now.
No, you're right. You're right. I agree. I think the only show that I can think of right now, and I'm not sure it's even on air, and I honestly, thinking in retrospect now, I got a casting call for this show, and I realized I think I got the casting call because I have Nigerian, like I put on my bio, like I have Nigerian African, quote unquote, African garbs in my closet that I can wear on set. Which is, I think the show is called ABISHOLA Loves Sam, or Sam Loves ABISHOLA, something like that on ABC. And I'm pretty sure that is the only show, which I haven't watched. So this is not a promo or anything, guys, that has literally the narrative of being Nigerian in the space. Like there's shows where you have characters who are African of sorts, and you have them do their little Afro beats dance. Dear white people. But like there's no show that really even shows the difference between being West African and East African and South African and North African. Like a Moroccan is definitely different than what I'm growing up with. So if I have Ethiopian friends, there is literally very little that we have in common other than that we have brown skin. Like that is the only thing that we have in common. But all of a sudden you cast somebody who you really don't know where in the continent they're from, or even if they are of African descent, and you just like, they are representative of the whole continent, all 52, 54 countries, can't remember which one. This person represents all of it as if it's the United States of America. You can't even have somebody playing Texan from, Chicago. Like you can't even do that. And you think a whole continent is going to do the same thing. It's just, it's ironic and funny at the same time, and just disappointing at the same time.
For sure. I like when people are just like, what is Texas about? Well, like on one hand, you have Beyonce, Megan Thee Stallion, Lizzo. You also have people like Matthew McConaughey, Selena Gomez, right? Like the fact that people want some sort of like representation of like, we need one Black character, right?
Exactly.
Like, well, what are they aside from Black?
Exactly. I completely agree. I think that is the biggest problem. It's a diversity check, unfortunately, until, we have creatives like you and I to come into the space and be like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that anymore. let's revamp everything. Let's change it. Okay. But I'm seeing the time click by, so I want to move on to the next section and talk a little bit. I think we've actually really touched upon a little bit of everything as we're going through, but I wanted to just shift gears a little bit and dive a little bit more into those teen years, because I think what happened as a teen does inform a lot of the stuff that we're doing. And I think a lot of adults is just relearning or reloving what you used to love as a child, that people told you can't make money out of that. And then you realize, actually, it's 2021. I can make money out of anything if I want to. So let's talk a little bit about the teen years. You did talk a little bit about it, how you were in high school, you felt like you had to be that bitchy queer character. The queer character had to be you for people to really realize and accept you as a gay person. So let's dive a little bit more into that and just like share your experience and what you learned from there, how you think it informed your personality and your relationships today.
Yeah, wow. Such a loaded question. I think just because my teen years, I can't remember too much about them because depression has really kind of just like erased a lot of these memories. And some of it is probably a self-guarding mechanism of protection. But I do remember being young and trigger warning, a couple of slurs about to be thrown. I remember being called a faggot in the second grade. I remember being called chink, like on the daily. And so growing up in Texas as not only Asian, but also queer, I had a really, really tough time, to the point where I think I became a bitch out of self-protection, and then just molded that into a lot more of who I was. I was embarrassed to be queer. I was embarrassed to be Asian. I used to take Chinese lessons once a week, and I threw such a fit that they stopped. And then lo and behold, I went and did my master's in Taiwan, kind of reclaiming that identity. But it was like, oh, well, now I have to like relearn Mandarin. And it was just such something I definitely needed to go through. But it sucks that I know that there's someone else literally having that same exact experience. And it's like, all right, Jonathan, like chop, it's time to make that documentary, time to make that whatever, and let people know that this is something that can be changed. It doesn't have to be the same forever. So it's definitely made me to who I am, but it almost didn't, right? I was extremely depressed, extremely suicidal. I am a survivor of self-harm. I just for the longest time in high school, I went from bitchy to depressed, right? It was polar opposite.
It's like, I don't think it's polar opposites. I feel like it's actually two sides of the same coin when you're acting as something that you know you're not, and then you go into a space where you actually get to reflect on yourself. And immediately, like it's like two sides of the same coin. It's the same person where you realize, no, the person I've been performing as is not me. This person is me. And now I'm sad that I can't be that. You get what I mean? So I completely understand.
You just articulated so well what that felt like. It's just, I grew up Southern Baptist. And I just remember hearing so many times just being like, oh, like gay people are an abomination and love the sin or hate the sin. And it's religious trauma. It's religious trauma that still affects me to this day. Because there was no part of quote unquote God's plan that involved me attempting to kill myself. There's no justification for that. And I think that when my youth pastor blackmailed me into coming out when I was in high school to my parents.
Wow. Yeah. Really? Wow. Yeah. I'm so sorry that happened.
It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Yes. And he still thinks he's correct. And he's still the youth pastor.
First of all, Jonathan, you have to go and fight that person in the streets, because that is so... How dare he tell you when you should feel comfortable to tell your closest family who you are? No, that is your job. That is your story, your journey. And he totally stole that from you. I would fight. Oh, immediately. Like the first plane, I'd be like, hey, youth pastor, I'm gonna be back home. Literally, time moment. Yeah. Ready, let's go.
The thing is, I know where he lives. So like
pull up. Okay.
Yeah. No, it was
right
like
outside. It's like, I know what you did to me.
Yes. At the time though, I was like so into the church that I was just like, you know what, like, yeah, like I was like, you know what, I forgive you, blah, 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 blah. And I still went to church a couple of times after that. And we were still like, would talk in the hallways. And like, now that I think about it, I was just like, you don't have to be nice. Like, that was like, you know what, like he lied too. Like everyone in the church that's like still went was like, oh, we had no idea it went down like that. Or like gaslighting me and be like, are you sure that's what he said? Or like, are you sure that's what happened? And I was like, bitch, I lived it. Like,
I was there. I was present. That happened.
Yeah. And it's just like, I'm so glad that I am out to my parents, but it didn't have to be that way. Like,
exactly.
Whenever I go through some boy problems, I can always like call my parents and be like, oh, hey, like going through some boy problems, I'm pretty sad. And that's like such a gift and that's such a blessing.
Absolutely.
That I know so many people don't have. And like one of the reasons why I was not ready to come out was because I legit thought I was going to get kicked out. Like I have 3 older sisters. I'm the only quote unquote, I was identified as male at the time. So I was the only male, could be the only person to pass down like the name. It's just, I literally thought that I was going to get kicked out, and it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And that was probably the pivotal moment of my teenage years, having to go through that experience. And now, I mean, I'm wearing a shirt that says bottom on it, right? So like came out like, on the other side, like doing better. And one of those reasons is because I went to Taiwan, where I was no longer immigrant, Asian, queer. I was just queer and like a little bit Taiwanese American, but you can pass sometimes. And I just got to explore what queerness and gender and sexuality was for me for 2 whole years while I struggled to do a master's program. And like, that's such a privilege that people don't get. I'm so grateful.
Yeah, I agree. There is so much to discuss and dig deeper into it. First of all, I cannot believe you, pastor, did that. And we could definitely, another time, talk through it, because I'm mad for you that he,
Thank you.
in his head, thought that that was okay, but that's another conversation for another day.
Yeah.
But I also like wanted to dig deeper into, and I think it also touched points into how we even met, and we were talking, like I said, we'll stick a pin into it, and having, you know, a community and being able to work with Jess, who's also an amazing creative. And when you're able to be with people that you can really feel safe and secure around, you create the greatest work possible. Yeah. Just dive a little bit more into how being in a community, like we both grew up as immigrant kids in a predominantly white space. And it wasn't until we found people who looked like us or talked like us or had that similar upbringing when we realized, oh, we're not alone. And I can be more myself because I know that I am not the unicorn that made it so far. So diving a little bit more into the community found in Taiwan and how that really shaped and helped you become the person you are today and what you want to do.
I just want to go back because I think you said something that I want to have like framed and put above my bed. We were talking about how like when you are with people you're comfortable with, you create like the best work possible. And I think that's just such a powerful statement. And I think that is so true. And I hope aside from, you know, Drama High, we are able to continue occupying.
Oh yes. Oh no, but honestly, you're going to be on my show on it. Once I'm mentally fully back into writing mode, best believe I'm giving you a call like, hey, yeah, you're going to have to come work on Americanda because I got scripts for you. I got characters for you. They're there. We need somebody with your voice and experience. It's there for you. Okay. Not even a single word.
But yeah, I mean, I think that there's so much to talk about, and I'm so grateful to like have with you. I had a rough go during my master's as well, right? Like the whole kind of like not really being comfortable in my skin, had some boy problems, went through some more depression, went through some more suicidal tendencies, like passive suicidality, active suicidality, just a whole bunch of crap during my master's. But what really like pulled me through it, not only was the community, but it was also through like doing creative work. There were days where I can vividly remember it was Christmas, and I woke up, and within 30 minutes, I would have attempted suicide within 30 minutes, and somehow I don't know how, but my parents sent me a text message essentially, and was like, "How are you?" And I was like,
yes.
"Call me now." And I like through some divine or universal intervention, I don't know what, but within those 30 minutes where I would have attempted suicide, I was able to have a call with my parents and my sisters, and it completely like held me over. So number one, I would say is my family, who I can be absolutely weird around and have known all of the gross and weird things about queerness and Asianness and how shitty I was as a kid. And then the second would be not specifically Asian folks, but Asian American folks in Taiwan. It was so much easier to speak to someone who was Asian American rather than to someone who was just Asian, period.
That is true.
And yeah, and I think that kind of dual identity, whether you're Latin American or like maybe like African American versus someone who was like just Black, I don't know, right? Like I feel like if there was someone who was just Asian, or even if they were just Taiwanese, I would have had such a hard time relating to them rather than
no, you're right.
Chinese American or like a Taiwanese American. And I think it's just because maybe it's because it's America and we're all under that like oppression. We all know
together, all struggling.
We all know how to connect with that. And so for me, it was Asian Americans, but it was also a lot of like African Americans who were in Taiwan for a myriad of reasons, and even people who were Black and British. They were there, and I think it was easy to talk to them. I think because American society is so pervasive in globalization, that when we were there, it was around the time Ferguson and things like that. And so when they thought about putting on something where for the community, for the Taiwanese community specifically, to experience like why do Black Lives Matter? It was so much easier for me to be in that space than to be in like a space for like people with going for like an MSc like I was, right? And I think that's because I grew up, elementary was predominantly white, and then junior high was predominantly Latin or Latin American, and then high school was predominantly Black. And so I feel like just knowing how, I think it's a very particular way of growing up, but like being able to be exposed to all three. I don't want to say all three.
The only three races.
The only three races. But I think being exposed to three other races other than Asian really helped me, I think, understand what our commonalities are. And like, I know we shouldn't like nitpick and be like, oh, but like we're all human. But I think there were a lot of commonalities that we can always talk about. And I think that's kind of how you start a community. And that's kind of how you start talking about the things that matter to your community with the people who are quote unquote in your community then. So I think there's so much for me to learn from other like Latin Americans or even like Mexican Americans, even Mexican Texans, right? Like there's so much for me to learn about how their experience are. That I'm grateful for the opportunity to be in a space, I think, where it's not as segregated, I think, where it's like not all people of color are lumped together. I think it was nice to have those distinctions.
Absolutely.
And how, I mean, I'm struggling still now, how to be a better ally. And how to kind of break those really, really awkward Asian barriers to talk about things that matter, to talk specifically about, you know, like children, immigrants in cages, you know, or like, or even like having a conversation about the Rittenhouse trial and things like that, right? Like how, like, there's so much more that I can be doing as a Taiwanese Texan or like a queer Taiwanese Texan for these different communities that I just am not. And I think that's something that I'm continually trying to learn. And hopefully as I like listen to more of these podcast episodes, I can learn how to be a better ally, because we're trying our best.
I agree. And I think there's many things to build off of there. And the one thing, we can start with the allyship. Actually, no, I'm going to start with the building the communities because I have a lot to say on the allyship. But I completely agree when you were talking about how there's even a difference between being Taiwanese and Taiwanese American. I literally, the same thing happened to me where when we went to Nigeria and we would stop by London on the way there, and we would be there for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. Then go to Nigeria for 6 to 8 weeks. Even though they were my family, and even though we're all Nigerian, you can literally see that where you currently are does still inform who you are and what you do. So like you were talking about like the going to Chinese school and then not doing that anymore. I remember when I was younger, my family my mom and my dad were adamant about speaking to us in Yoruba and us responding in Yoruba. And then all of a sudden we just didn't do it anymore. And now I'm here at 26, so regretful. It's like, oh yeah, I know how to speak English and I can speak Spanish and I can do this, but I can't even speak my mother tongue. And it's like, I feel like personally in my head, the math I've made out, and it's a conversation I need to have another day with my family. But I think like when you grow up in a society like the US, where everything is a quote unquote melting pot, and the only way for you to get by is if you either fit into the trope or you're an outlier. And I think to save us the stress, save us the trauma of having to go to a store and they're like, speak English. They would rather just like, in our home, I will speak to Yoruba, or any space we're in, you can speak to me in Yoruba. But when you speak to me, it doesn't matter what language, speak in English, speak in Yoruba, do whatever you want to do, whatever you're comfortable with and whatever society is comfortable with. And I think you can see that with Nigerian Americans, particularly, we have a bigger dissonance between who our Nigerian is. Like, we have the clothes, we know how to cook the food, we listen to Afrobeats, you probably understand it very well. But I would say only a handful of us really, unless they were born there and moved over, if you were born here, they very much don't have the language intact. But if you go to UK, I keep calling them like Nigerians with a passport, because them kids 24/7, doesn't matter what, just click on like that, they will start speaking their mother tongue. I'm just like, how does that happen? What was it? Well, you live in a society where, even though the UK is also, we can definitely another day talk about how bad the UK is. Yeah. To my UK listeners, I understand, we can talk about that one day. But there's still, because I feel like because of the way the UK system is built, where there is that greater separation, and it's like, we don't care if you blend in or not, you'll always be Nigerian. People actually dive more into their Nigerianness or into whatever ethnicity they are, because at the end of the day, the UK is still going to be like, well, your family 25 years ago, 100 years ago came from there, so you are still them. While the US is like, well, if you want to stay here, you have to be more like us. And I think that very much informed when you were in Taiwan, where it's like the people who were closer to you were people who lived the experience as you did. And because like talking about even Black Lives Matter, or Stop Asian Hate, or Trans Lives Matter, or LGBT, anything like outside of the US often just goes shoo for a lot of people. Because it's like when you talk about it, even in Nigeria, they'd be like, but if you do this and you do that, and they're doing this, and this is the repercussions. Like, when you live with these community, with these people every single day, you really see the things that aren't translated in social media or traditional media to the outside public. So they're like, well, we only see this, this, and this. So this is how we're making the math adds up to this. And these are the problems and the reasons, the answers and the solution. While when you're on the ground, you see is very much more gray. There's so much more you need to decipher, and it's so much more nuanced. So when you have those conversations, if you don't have those other details in the back of your head to inform a conversation, then people are like, well, why is it like that? It's like, if I have to go through 400 years of history just to bring you to where we are right here to talk about it. It's tiring for me. I just can't do that. But I think that really, I think I agree with what you were talking about with your experience in Taiwan. And then switching to the allyship, I think I strongly agree with you. The only thing, this is my sense on this, and we can have my positioning on this, and we can have a deeper conversation in the last few minutes that we have together. My positioning now, as you know, growing as a human being and also as an ally for many communities, I've realized that there is, specifically because we are in the position, you being a queer Asian, me being an African American, there is literally so much we can do as allies to support other communities, as well as we're also battling our own demons. And I think that any work that you do, if you're trying to uplift that community specifically, is the best work you can do from the position that we're in. It's like, imagine you are like, there's tiers, right? Like we're all looking up. There's the higher, who is, you know, straight white male man, mid 40 to 65 with a whole bunch of cash. That is top tier. If you're there, you're living the best life in America. Nothing can get you. Now, then you go tiers down, and everyone's looking up to like, I would like to live a normal life in the US where, you know, tomorrow I know my lights will still be on. I have food in the fridge. There's a roof over my head. I can walk outside and nobody's going to call me a slur. That's all we truly hope for every day, right? It's kind of sad, but that's like the most that we just like a basic, you know, just basic decency is all we ask for in the US. And if you're all on this level, we can only help each other so much to get to that. It's often the only way that you can actually go up is if you take materials from there and equal the leveling field. So I think in my head, it's like, I've noticed that the strongest allies are usually the ones who are with you. I think it does inform creativity as well, where it reminds me of when Issa Rae, love her to death, shout out to Issa Rae. She was in an interview, she said, how I got to Insecure was not by reaching up, it was building across, right? I was able to uplift myself by building across. And I think that a lot of the allyship that we have today is building across. But in this power dynamic, if people from above, if white people don't realize like the shit that they're doing, we will always still be in this struggle where like there will always be that we can build so much, but if you continue to say like, there's not a problem here, and the people in power are the ones saying, there's not a problem here, you will always, we can only go so much to get the solution. So I think being an ally is always going to be, it's ever changing. Allyship from the 70s is not the same as what allyship looks like today, especially with the advent of social media. Like even the things that we like, now we have terms like performative social activism, and then you have allyship and activism, and you're this and you're that. There's so many different ways you can support or not support, like in your head support, to say the least. But I think it's so nuanced now that giving yourself grace and also knowing that what you're doing with the best intention possible. And then also opening yourself up for positive criticism, you know, constructive criticism where you can see, oh, this is where the problem lies. Okay, I can build off that. I think that really does help inform what true allyship is. And I think that's a lot of the stuff that because I can remember as a young child, like, I was like, why did I say it that way? Oh, because we were allowed to say it that way, but that's still not right. You should have said that way in that first place. Just having those conversations in your head and with other people within the community and being not only vocal, but making space for them to be vocal as well, I think is the truest way you can be an ally. And we just got to work on it. I don't know where I was going with that train of thought, but I think you are right in the sense where we still have so much to do, specifically because there's just so much turmoil and there's so much that we ourselves can't be a part of every community. So like we don't have all the shared experiences. There's a lot of shared experiences, but we can't all have the shared experiences. So how to truly support and not, you know, overshadow the others in their own advocacy is the best type of allyship. And then also giving yourself grace to know that we're all still learning. And as long as we're still open to learning and still active and changing, we'll be able to actually do the work that we're trying to do rather than pedaling back and forth, which I feel like we're not even on a cycle. We're not on a bicycle. We're in a cycling class going nowhere all together. That's how I feel. The best way to describe it. But one day, the world will upheaval and I'll be there like, yes, finally, let's go, guys. Pack your bags. We're starting a revolution.
For sure. And I mean, I think that like, you're so intelligent to be able to like sift through all of like our word vomit and like be able to like lay it out. Like props to you. I could never. And I'm sure there were so many things that I said that like in the train of thought were so offensive. And then in the future will be offensive, right? Like one of the reasons I stopped is because sociology is changing, right? And like, we could be saying Latinx and then there's already conversations happening about, you know, it's Latin E, you know? And so like, there's so many things that we can do now that are going to be different a couple of years from now. So it's kind of about the intention. But the reason I wanted to talk about advocacy is because what I'm trying to figure out in my own life is how to affect people's lives now and in the future. So with film and advocacy, it's about helping people's lives now. And with science, it's about helping people's lives in the future. How can we do something that in 10 years when it gets approved, finally, it's going to be able to not only help people, but to be equitable. And I think that's one of the big things with science and why I was so passionate about like STD health and HIV health growing up is because we have still that disparity and we need to be able to do something not only in the long run, but in the short term. And I think that's what really started me with advocacy. And I think that's why I am, shout out to San Diego Pride, but I'm part of the Queer Asian Pacific Islander Middle Eastern Desi American Coalition.
That's a long name.
It's a long one. Yeah. And I think it should be long because like we were talking about monoliths, right? We need to know how to support our Middle Eastern sisters, brothers, and non-binary siblings, you know, as well as our South Asian ones, you know, like love, never have I ever, right? Like how, like, it's like South Asian representation is so important, specifically South Asian and American representation. We were abusing Hawaii during the COVID crisis, and we still weren't paying attention to our Pacific Islander, like sisters, brothers.
Absolutely.
It's just like, there's so many things that we can do, but I love what you said, and I love Issa Rae, and I love that quote because it's so important. If you are in the area on January, there is a BIPOC cookout, and it's the Latin Pride, the Black Pride, as well as the San Diego Asian Pride coalitions are all going to get together, have a cookout, talk about how we can support each other.
I love it.
And I'm going to forever remember that Issa Rae quote now. Thank you so much. Amazing.
You know me, Issa Rae, I'm trying to be her, so I have everything memorized. It's like, she did say that one time. Okay, let me start doing that too. Okay, let's get it, let's go. But I've taken so much of your time. I'm looking at the clock and we are over time. So thank you so much once again for being my first guest speaker. This was phenomenal. This was better than I ever imagined. And I'm so glad that I was able to get you on. Because everything you said so far is like chef's kiss, everything we can say here. Is there anything you want to tell the listeners about future projects, future work, science, creative, life related, anything, one last thing you feel like, I should have said that. You're thinking in the back of your head. I know you're thinking about it. It's like, let me put this out. This is your opportunity to speak and forever hold your truth.
For sure. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me on and for starting this. I think it's going to help so many people, which is, I can't wait. But I think the last thing that I would want to leave people with is don't wait. There's something that you can do right now. The universe is literally at your fingertips. You can find something to be passionate about right now. Things that you can think about right now. Food banks, right? Food insecurity or housing insecure folks, so important. There's an organization in Canada that raises funds to take people who are in countries where queerness is either illegal or criminalized and brings them to Canada on a refugee visa. There are things happening now. And if you're passionate about something, even if you're not passionate about something, find something that you are passionate about and get involved. You can do it now.
Absolutely. No waiting, no fighting. I'm sorry, my club John, but no waiting, no fighting, okay?
Rest
Thank you
up.
so much.
Don't wait.
Exactly. Make sure to eat your veggies, drink your water, sleep, and then once you wake up, do some advocacy work, okay? Stay hydrated.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, you don't need bad skin while you're trying to change the world, okay?
Yes.
Thank you so much once again. I will let you be. You have a wonderful rest of your evening. And for anyone else tuning in, thank you so much for joining us. Please be on the lookout for the next episode. I'm not going to promise when that's going to be, but it is the start of something new. So please stay tuned, stay updated, and we will definitely get you some more content. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.